Welcome to the 20th Avenue podcast. My name is Donald Molosi, and this is continuing a series that we started about 2 years ago with the Upright African Movement and the 20th Avenue podcast. And today we're speaking to Boikhutso Molefhi, whom a lot of you might recognize from his performances. So, BK, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. Really honored to be here. Yeah. Hope you're good.
Thank
Hope
you.
you're
We're,
blessed.
we're happy to have you here. Thank you. Thank you. We're happy to have you here because you are a theater practitioner and trained actor obsessed with African stories. That's how your social media I've seen online describes you. Um, can you just share a little bit how you came into theater, whether that came from in your childhood or was it like,
I see. I got into theater at a young age. I think I saw this production, Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. It was then directed by, I
yes.
believe his name is Stuart White. Go Mike Song.
Hmm.
I remember just sitting there, watched the performances live, and then had this moment of, yeah, this is what I want to do with my life. Like the stage is what I'm called for. I think Shakespeare said it, life's but a stage. And so I remember
Yeah.
getting home, went online, started watching some of the different people who had done Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, started reciting the songs. And then fast forward to I think maybe 2 years later, or a year later, I did like a production at church. I think, yeah, I started going through church, just writing scripts because I used to write a lot during history class. And then that then ventured into um, mentorships, such as yourself, as I got older, you know, doing work with folktale theater, from Mainane to Blue, Black, and White, all these different things. Yeah, then 2018, I did my one man show titled Kimotswana, The Naked Truth, which was just
Yeah.
exploring certain aspects of culture Botswana and also certain stories that were like such as El Negro that were not necessarily told that you stumble upon in conversation. You're like, wait, you mean Botswana? Let me
Yeah.
investigate it further. you know. And so then, yeah, then I went to also study it. I studied it after Cape Town, 2019 to 2021.
Hmm.
Coming here now, being in Botswana,
Yeah. And practicing. So then,
practicing.
sort of, how did you go from, the first time when you saw Joseph at the Technicolor Dreamcoat to learning how to perform?
I see. So at school, when I went to Marapula High School, and so they had a drama department, and so I was taught by Clayton Ndlovu. I was taught by Defopaya, you know, uh, even Defopaya, watching him on TV, and then that's your form teacher. Like, what do you mean? This is my form teacher.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. Yes.
And so yeah,
Yeah.
so like those encounters. So I started doing a lot of drama, like a lot of school productions, just
Yeah.
to nurture those talents. And when it came to the aspect of writing, I think I've always been fascinated by history. And
Mm.
so history, I think it was drama, English, history. Those are the only subjects where I actually paid attention. Like the physics, I was like, I'm here just because I gotta do two sciences. You know what I'm saying? I'm just ticking
Yeah.
a box. And so
Yeah.
other subjects I would write like scripts in geography, in not necessarily maths, but yeah, geography. So there were certain subjects that where I was writing scripts and just trying to exercise that muscle. And then when I graduated, now just doing my own solo things there and there, like spoken word, and then taking the spoken word into a short play, so to say.
Mm.
Yeah. And
So
eventually going
then
to
you
church.
obviously and church as well. I like that you sort of you're behind the scenes as well as on the scenes as a performer, um, and that you also take your theater sort of into unconventional spaces like churches. Why is that important to you to take it away from sort of the theater as we know it in a proscenium to a church?
I think life happens everywhere. Like you listen to stories in the Bible. Again, the play that got me into theater was the story of Joseph, right? And so I
Mhm.
started looking at sermons as what will a sermon, or rather a story, a biblical story, look like told on the stage, right? Where you have pastors who are very articulate in terms of how they articulate the stories in the Bible, with their
Mhm.
voices, they enunciate, they color it up, they bring it to life. But I thought, why don't I take it a step further and then bring the everyday to day challenges that people are seeing, even just taking the plays outside of church, but also looking at it. You go to a bar, a shabin, a tavern. There are scenes happening there. As a
Yeah.
writer, you're very observant to a lot of things. So you go to parliament. I mean, lately, you look at countries like South Africa, and all these different countries where there are interesting things that are happening, and just
Mhm.
trying to see, can I take that dynamic and bring it into a different space? Will the context change? Like for currently, if you don't mind me getting to this, there's a production
Mhm.
that we're currently writing right now,
Yeah.
around the Baholo, and it's taking around the apartheid era of what was going on around that. But now, one of the matches we're trying to do is we're playing around two parallels. So one, we're trying to have a courtroom scene, whereas this character is suing somebody for an injustice they feel like they encountered in a courtroom scene in terms of like a Western setting. And then we
Mhm.
have another scene where the same dynamic happens, but in a kotla. And
Mm.
the articulation changes, your honor, Hosi, there's
Yes, yes,
it's
yeah.
different in terms of how you
There's
approach it.
a different protocol. Yeah,
A different protocol, so to say, which
yeah,
is
yeah,
which is lovely about theater.
yeah, yeah. I like that kind of that seeing theater in everyday life, seeing roles in everyday life and how we put on performances in everyday life. I think it helps us sort of reflect. Um, I also noticed before I go into my next question that it was your birthday a couple of days ago, so happy belated birthday. How
Thank you,
old are
thank you,
you
thank you.
turning?
26.
26. Nice, nice, nice,
26.
nice.
Just crossed the
Yeah,
quarter of a century.
yeah. I remember
Yeah.
it like it was yesterday. But I'm interested because you mentioned that you obviously saw a play, it sparked something in you as a child. You had the education that prepared you, gave you the tools. I mean, I also went to Marapula, and I feel that, without having gone to Marapula, there's just a lot that I wouldn't have been able to do in my career. And it took that mentorship, sort of seeing your teachers who are also performers and are more invested in your growth. When you perform um, in a place like Mighty Song Theatre, and when you perform at a church, what's the difference in the experience for you as an actor?
I think one is the understanding of the medium. When you're in the context of church, there's a certain way in which church happens. I don't want to say church happens, but in a sense that the
Yeah,
people don't have the knowledge of theater, right? Bona is
yeah.
just people just having fun on stage, or they're telling a story. But when you come into a
Mm,
context of theater, you're coming into the space of your peers. There's a bit more, the expectation is higher, right? Where,
mm.
okay, what is your play exploring? Oh, societal issues, societal ills. There's a more, interrogative, and I think there's a sense of you got to do your due diligence with whatever story you're telling, as compared, because the accountability is different as compared to a church
Yeah,
setting. You know, I mean,
yes.
personally, as a practitioner, I actually don't see like due diligence both ways because you're telling a story.
Yeah,
At the end of the day, so you got to do the work.
yeah.
So I think predominantly it tends to be that. I remember I was talking to this other. He's an Italian director. He was talking about how to do theater you have to teach theater. You know, and the
Mm,
teaching is what tends to be draining, because you bring a
yeah,
creative performance, but your audience, or rather the people that are the immediate consumers of your work, don't understand the nuance of what you're doing until
yeah,
you go outside, when they're like, oh, fascinating, I like what you did with, sort of a thing.
yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. And I really like this idea very much. Because again, one of the things that I learned when I was at Marapula was site-specific theater very early on, which I'm sure you also learned. Just staging in unconventional spaces. It does something to you as a theater maker. But just moving away from your early education, what do you say to people that say, um, you know, then the theater space, for it to open up to other opportunities, say internationally, as you ended up going to South Africa, for example, that it takes a certain level of privilege, such as early mentorship, that a school like Marapula can give, um, at that level. I mean, you're talking about being mentored by someone you watched on screen. That's not the experience of most people who come into theater.
Yeah, no, I think 100% that is it's an interesting thing, in a sense that, I remember someone said you got to be a participant in your own success. And I think a lot of times what people tend to miss out is, and again, it comes from a knowledge thing. I think when I went to Cape Town, it was one of
Mhm.
those spaces where you appreciate Hore. These people are only here for just a semester. Like the lectures that they bring in. And if
Yeah.
you don't capitalize, you're losing so much,
Mm,
right? Hore,
mm,
and which is true. But then I think having conversations with different people telling you go to theater spaces. I'm teaching Banaba Liduma Senior Secondary School. There's some students that I'm incubating, and one of the
mm,
things in my first meeting with them was, "Have you been to a theater? Do you know where Mighty Song Mantraning Little Theater is?"
mm,
Oh, and it's what's a theater? I don't know. And so it feels like it's a foreign concept, but then you track it back years before, like maybe early 2000s, you know, and a conversation we've had before, where you're like, you
yeah.
realize what there used to be NGOs or government used to be doing things where you are, where people can participate, Barnabas Squarely that taught theater, and so there's an incubation thing that happens where you're having, I mean, to this day, I think government still does National Arts Festival, which I think is a great thing where people can always from different places,
Mm,
pitch in and do their theater work, right? And so,
mm,
but I think it's the understanding that there's more out there. And but again, we got to go back to the school level, like you were saying, such that you don't come at that from a varsity level, because by then you're already disadvantaged. I mean, even me personally, going to the school that I went to, when I got to Cape Town, I felt like I was behind in first year
mm.
because I'm
Really?
with
Mm,
yeah, I'm with people who did Shakespeare. I'm with people
yeah,
who have done like a young one man show. And I'm like, I
yeah,
just arrived here. What do you
yeah,
mean Shakespeare?
yeah,
Because we
yeah.
did Shakespeare in English literature, right? And so,
Mm,
but then there's that cultural shock thing that tends to happen. But even with that, I still tell people, what YouTube University exists, right? One of my
yeah.
teachers taught me that. She told me about this YouTube channel called the Less Good Center. I think the Less Good, yeah, the Let's Good Center, and they're constantly just
Mhm.
posting. So I believe it's like a residency that happens in Johannesburg, and they're constantly posting theater productions. And so
Yeah,
I watch them a lot. The more you watch, the more you learn, the more you grow, the more you evolve. And so I'll
yeah,
say to as much as there is maybe a privilege when you go to certain schools, but in the same breath, you know, be a practitioner. DM these people. I'm messaging people on LinkedIn.
mm,
Just doing the research, do your due diligence. Who is this person? What work have they done? And it's that
yeah,
gives you a bit of an upper edge. So you go from auditioning to I know this guy, you know,
yeah.
sort of a
No,
thing.
I can attest to that. I've seen how hard you work. I've seen how much you give to a production, to learning about our histories, which for me, I mean, because there's obviously a gap between me and you in age. For me, I was so happy to see someone of, I guess, the next generation in terms of sort of divisions, um, sort of show such an interest in who we were before 1966.
Mhm.
I mean, that's rare, and I really enjoyed that. But one of the things that I remember um, sort of lamenting was the fact that our generation was complaining about the lack of a national theater, that you can't really perform at a theater that is sort of equipped in Botswana unless you're on school grounds or you're on army grounds. But there's no independent national theatre. And then when I saw that your generation still doesn't have access to any such space, how do you feel about that, having been in South Africa, where there's definitely the National Theatre and other theatres like that? Do you feel that something is lacking in your practice when you're in Botswana because of that space not being there, or not?
No, I believe it is like, and I think it also cripples us to a degree in a sense that what we can do becomes limited. Like in a sense that you look at, again, like you mentioned, the theaters are will be like a military location or a school. There are certain parameters that those individual entities operate in, right? And so the flexibility that a national theater or a state theater would give you varies from what a school would give you. School, they got to think about their students, they got to, and then there's also, as much as, because I mean, everyone's looking out for their best interest. So the school is going to be, okay, how many students can you also get in this production? There's a bit of that,
Mhm.
that squeezing in that sometimes might deviate from the original vision that you might have. And so I think
Yes.
that also limits the amount of creative expression that will then happen. That could happen. You look at
So what you
even,
will do about it?
yeah, I mean, I think it's to mobilize. I think taking, I mean, of course, the political dynamics are different. Like I look at the youth in Kenya, and I'm inspired, honestly and
Mhm.
truly, because I look at the fact that they're mobilizing because there's a bigger cause that they're standing for. And I think as creatives, there needs to be that union within ourselves that, okay, this is what we need to get the industry to a certain level. At such an international competitive level, because it's one thing to go above. When I was in Cape Town, even the museums were incubating artists. They're like, no, come
Mhm.
here for 3 months, you do a show, I approached one of the museums in Botswana, and there was a thing of the systems are different. You know,
Yeah.
and I think as artists, it's also us learning how to operate with those different dynamics. Because
Yeah.
there are people who are doing work with these entities because they're finding ways to operate within their systems, and
Yeah.
and I think sometimes it's like finding that middle ground where you operate within it and then you change it. Because I think sometimes people need to be exposed to that, and the danger of having been exposed to so much is your expectations are so much that sometimes it might get depressing when those things are
Yeah.
not happening, because it's like you're constantly fighting this
Understand.
this this thing, you know.
Yeah. And I'm glad that because I think it's always good for us to spend time home to pass on what we can. And even if you leave later and do work outside, but to have given something at home. We don't have Tirelo Shaba anymore, but I think to do your own sort of unofficial Tirelo Shaba in a way, because we are still a growing industry. Um, and coming back to your one-liner, theater practitioner and trained actor. The trained actor part, could you just say a little bit more? Now you're finished with high school, who's mentoring you? Who is guiding you towards schools, and how do you navigate with that, because we don't have sort of actor training places yet in Botswana.
I see. So when it
I
came to
mean, I know
school,
the UB has BAPA, sorry, I should correct. The UB has BAPA and other institutions, but I'm talking about a conservatory. Yes, please go ahead.
oh yeah, yeah, I don't think in terms of conservatory many exist. I might argue maybe for in terms of visual arts, I think Art Gaborone, I believe
Mhm.
they're a center that really is pushing. When it came to, I think after high school, coming to 2017, 18, that's when we interacted. That's where
Yeah.
we had the conversation,
Yeah.
and I'm really blessed. Honestly speaking, I'm really blessed to have worked with you because of your exposure. I think there were certain things I was not able to go through. You know, that thing of like experience is the best teacher. I dodged that one. By virtue by virtue of what you were exposed to. And I think it's coming to then folktale theater, the work that we did, the different styles of theater that we did. They were very, 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 very important. Oh, sorry. Just give me a forgive me for that.
No problem. No problem.
Yeah, how do you pull out the button? How do you pull out one by one? Take a Friday. So coming to where was I?
That's all
So
right.
coming to the folktale theater, the type of work that we're doing, meeting different people who are also
Yeah.
exposed, who are also have different training. Because Atang, he was trained go UB. He studied at UB. He was in
Exactly. Yeah.
colors. We have Zanele. She's working Go. It's on a television. She has also her own background and experience. And I think with me, it was a thing of like, how much can you get out of this? Because understanding that you're with these people for a fraction of time, right? And there's only so much you
Right.
can
Yeah.
get out of them. That if they leave you, you that information leaves with them. And so being
Yeah.
intentional, so I usually, I'm very intentional. Even the questions that I ask, I'm constantly assisting. Song, I'm there if there's a show happening that I really would love to watch and I have the time to go and watch. I arrive early. What do you guys need help with?
Yeah.
you know because it's those moments that build the intimacy with the directors, the production managers, and even the work that I'm doing this year
Yeah.
is by virtue of going to a theater show and connecting to the production manager, the visions aligning, because collaborations are going to be the best way to
Mm.
propel your career forward. I believe. Did I live something out? I'm not quite sure. Yeah, coming to that mentorships. Then when I got to Cape Town, there
Yeah.
was a
Do you
I
think
had a
that because that was 27? Oh,
yeah, 2017
yeah.
coming to 2018,
Yeah.
and then 2018, white color black.
You had a lecturer?
No, I'll get to the lecture, but I remember White Collar Black
Mm.
with Joseph, the director of White Collar Black, and I remember also having conversations with him, connecting with him after, asking
Yeah.
advice.
My God, we have done so many things together. Like, yeah,
Yeah, and I'm taking like I told you, I'm taking notes. I'm taking notes. I'm learning
that's
because
amazing.
that
Because I
information.
all I remember is how yeah.
Sorry, yeah.
No, I'm listening to you because I remember then as you were at the premiere of it as at Westwood, and then we ended up uh going to Durban, and my God, yeah, that was a really fantastic experience, and really grateful to the support that we were able to get from the foundation. And yeah, so please talk
You see,
more about that so that I don't go late. It was such a great experience.
yeah, that Devin was a great experience.
Especially the
Even
dinner with
even
Terry Pepper
understanding.
there, and there was really,
You see, even the thing of the networking dynamic on how the industry works when it comes to networking. That we have to see you in certain spaces. You don't need to stay too long, but we need to see in those spaces. And I think
yeah,
that was very fundamental for me because
yes,
I'm a home guy. I like to stay at home, work from home, would be scripts, research, only leaving to go do research and conduct interviews. And so for me, that was like, okay, because so you
yeah,
see that director is working with this artist. Ah, how do you find yourself in those conversations in those spaces? And so coming to 2020, 2020, actually 2019, a director by the name Nkanta, he's teaching us. So I've been blessed to have worked with when I was at school, um, outside lecturers, you know, because I believed their experience and insight is in real time. Not saying that the in-house lecturers don't have it, but they were already doing work, and so you're getting that. Okay,
yeah,
this is what these directors are looking for, right?
yeah,
And he said
mhm,
something to me. So I had this thing whereby after every class, I go to my lecturer and be like, "Thank you so much." Like it was just me though, right? And so he said,
yeah.
at some point, he was like, "If you keep this up, I'm gonna work with you." And I kid you, this year we're working together, and it's
Wow,
the
look
thing of
at
like
that.
it's an
Yeah,
investment that you're doing. And so
yeah,
2021, when we're doing our experimental theater festivals, one of my lecturers, Mabisa, she was working at the Baxter Theater. She had this thing, it really blew my mind, the system of how she works. She was like, you take a paper, right? And then
Yeah.
you write, you just do like these columns. And then
Mhm.
within them, you write you are constantly searching for opportunities, right? So you be like, okay, Baxter
Mhm.
Theater Festival is happening on this day. What are the requirements? What is the deadline? Who's like the festival facilitator, you know
Yeah.
oh, there's this grant, what do they want, who do I know, who knows the person who might help me with that grant, you know
Yes.
and it was things where I'm looking at some of my peers and I'm like, are y'all not mind blown like me? Like what's because
Yeah.
if you let being a student narrow your mind, your thinking, when you get into the end, I mean, you're already in the industry as a student by virtue of you're doing shows, you're bringing people, but then when you're on your own, it's a different ball game. This
Yes.
advice
It is.
people are paying to get, and
Yeah.
this person, she's just dropping it like that. And
Yeah.
I think that's why I always stress with people: mentorships. You cannot go wrong with mentorships. They propel your career forward.
Yeah.
They really do.
Yeah. I think you're completely right because I think you're one of the actors that I have seen be really open to mentorship in a way that I mean, one other thing that we did together was the this mentorship program where I matched up a young artist in Botswana with a Hollywood actor. And again, this was before the pandemic when, I mean, that was very, very important before the pandemic. Um, do you remember that?
I remember that, and I still there was this one time, end of last year, I was going through my mail, and I just going through some of the things that he said, and again, then you know, when you have a little understanding of the gravity of the opportunity in front of you.
Yeah.
It was
Is this
when
it?
I look
Who are
back.
we talking about again? Was it Hoji
uh,
or Casey?
no, OG. This is 20.
Hoji Fortuna, yes. The Angolan actor, yes, who was
Yes,
in Game of
and
Thrones. Yeah. Mhm.
so you sit there, you're like, later on, you're like, I fumbled because you still. I mean, I still learned nonetheless, right? But there's thing of
Yeah.
like you could have went
You need
further,
time to learn. Hmm.
you know, you could have went further, and it's that. So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
that was also a blessing in itself because they also expose you to systems outside of not just
Yes.
Botswana and South Africa, but also globally. This is what the world, and this is where the world is gravitating to. And so
Yeah.
start positioning yourself in such a way that you eventually get into those spaces. But I didn't
Exactly.
understand that at that point.
Yeah, because we all need time to sort of grow into these ideas and sort of have a lived experience. Because I mean, I know before I went to Hollywood, I had a whole, way I was thinking about it until I actually was living in a flat and paying rent and living in Hollywood. And that's a whole different ball game. Um, but I want to come back to this idea of early mentorship and early exposure to, you know, how the industry works. Were there any red flags you saw about the industry? I mean, we're living in a time when people are reflecting on how the industry should work. And do you, as an actor, have any boundaries or red lines that this experience of seeing what it's like made you have?
I think I've like at a young age, I was always worried about contracts. The thing of like someone can sue you for this. If
Yeah.
it feels like this big thing because you think you are
Yes.
gonna be the one to mess it up. But then
Yeah.
as I got older, there
Mm.
was this realization that it also holds the other party accountable. And
Yeah.
playing into that dynamic, Jorge, that is what's keeping those people accountable. That I can go back to a document and say, you said you're going to provide ABCD. And so when I was at school, there were dynamics where, so like, for example, at Cape Town, our lecturers used to bring people also in the industry. So one of the actresses, she was in a certain Netflix production. I forgot what it was. And I remember she spoke about how she had a moral, nudity clause in her contract that stated ABCD needs to happen. I'm not doing ABCD. And so when you are young, there's a thing of being exploited by people who know you don't know that, and
Mhm.
you don't know, okay, auditions, these are the spaces that I need to be in to do these auditions. That I should not, yeah, these are the spaces. Get an agent. What is the value of an agent? But you're like, no, get la ipuela tsaka, and you're like, but you don't have the
Yeah,
knowledge to, sometimes you can't
the
even stand up for
network.
yourself. You can't
Mm.
stand up for yourself and demand certain things that another actor gets for free, you know. And
Mm.
so
Yeah.
that was the thing for me, Jorge. You have to engage with these parties,
Mhm.
having an agent in Cape Town. I was talking to a friend of mine who said she has an agent, but when I was talking to my agent, she was telling us that, or she was telling me that you have to, like, for South Africa, there's a cap in which an agency cannot charge more than 25%, right? I don't know
Yeah.
if it's the same thing right now, but I remember that's what she said. So a friend of mine, she signed to an agent. Her agent was demanding 45%. And so,
Wow.
yeah, and
Why
I'm talking
doesn't
to
the
my
agent perform in a scene with her then?
at that point,
So that this halfway split makes sense.
we have,
Wow.
and so,
Okay.
but then it turned out that that agent was not registered to the body, yeah, these agencies in South Africa. Hence why they could charge their, and so the lack of knowledge was what I discovered was lacking, Um,
Mm.
yeah, so that's what, like,
Yeah.
mentorships help you know those dynamics. What how to enter
Yeah.
these things, ask for this. These are your rights, and standing on
Mm.
business, as they put it nowadays.
As it is,
You know.
right? But I mean, um, I want to move. I will move to the last part of your description, which is obsessed with African stories. But before I do that, as I hear you describing these opportunities that you work so hard to get and you made such good use of, like having access to a Hollywood actor by email, all of these where as you begin, all of these were paid opportunities, right?
Mm. Yeah.
Um,
No. The Sorry. Come again. The
yeah, all of these were paid opportunities, as in you had to part with money, to be even be eligible, right?
with
Or
the
no?
first two, no,
No.
no.
Okay.
And I think that's the grace again that that when people
Yeah.
bless you with those opportunities. But I do know, it's again, it's
What
when you
first
do the
two?
sorry.
What first two do you mean?
The ones you spoke about earlier, they were not paid. They were not paid for. The next one was, because I remember I did a workshop, with, you were doing actually a master class, and you had a booklet. I still have the booklet to this day, and the booklet
Yes.
that states all these different things to look out for. As an actor,
Yeah.
these are things that you got to develop. So that one I remember was a paid one. But then looking
Yeah.
at the access that information also gets you, Jorge, you know where to search from when you're moving into
Yeah.
the next part of your career. It's a good
Mm.
reference point.
True. Yeah. Mm. And then what sort of, because I remember when we met, I don't think you had read much about El Negro.
I had never read about El Negro. I'm not gonna sit here and lie and say I had 1 ounce of knowledge
So,
about the brother. No, no,
so
I didn't.
I,
Yeah,
I have
that,
no recollection of how it came up, but I do remember just watching what you describe as obsessed with African stories. I remember seeing that obsession with African stories just grow and grow. Like you would research everything about history. What was going on at that time? And yeah, how did you end up being obsessed with history as you describe yourself?
I think, actually it was when we were having the conversation, and I was talking to you about Otabanga and what I found out about how Africans were treated, you know,
Yeah.
and coming to, and I forever remember the story because it was a crazy, we're talking about Otabanga, we then talk about Sarah Bartman, and then you slide it in like it's nothing. You go, oh yeah, like El Negro. And I'm like, and I did that thing that people do. You're like, yeah, 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 like him, man. Oh, wait, who? you know, like who's that? You know, and then you started breaking it down. Oh no, this is the story, you know. And I think when people break down these stories for me, sometimes I don't immediately do a production around it, but I always have it in the back of my head. But El
Yeah.
Negro was different because I think he was the first story that I explored because Como Rapula and Map, you have verbal emancipate verbal emancipation, right? And where different students could come and then do different bodies of work. And so I read research coming from what you were saying, you know, the story of El Negro, you know, scholars, you know, and yeah, you know, the thing we know back, you know, and then that to Metro was telling his story, putting and also talking about and how they in terms of the origins of the word itself. So I've been so I stumbled upon these things in conversation because from people they're expecting that I know what I'm talking about. They expect they believe I know these stories. You know, you said like I'm talking about it, but you were talking about it. And so from an academic perspective, you know, to the history, you know, because I learned about wars with South Africa, you know, but then the wars more Botswana, I didn't have the knowledge of. I mean, granted, I went to private school, so the curriculum was more IGSC, you know, but it could still be where you find the educational input in their syllabus, you know. And I think by virtue of we can grow and expand ourselves and the knowledge about our history. Because even now, level our whole explores role during apartheid because you know I believe I've got who said this to give credit to this person, but they said Botswana is an oasis in the midst of chaos. South Africa is happening, Zimbabwe is happening, and these people, these artists are coming for you know because is like a save, like a harbor, you know, and so part of the is we exploring those stories, you know. Human Galloway here, a bunch of different writers, you know, with incubating, you know, with me to answer, um, also among the people who were being incubated there. And I got to conversation with him about Botswana's role and just even his body of work, you know. Yeah, so I think it's that. I think it's that amongst things.
Yeah. And I really like that because your passion for theater, you as an actor sort of bring in your passion for our history as well. That speaks to me a lot. I also noticed, you know, you sort of went into um, trying to sort of put these stories into existing as plays. Um, why was that important for you to do that? Were you trying to share the stories with others, or were you just trying to challenge yourself as a writer to apply your skills to a historical narrative? Because I see that you started working on Sarah Baartman's story as well, on the Herero and Namaqua genocide stories as well.
I think to assist in education of Botswana, because I look at like again coming to the story of the genocide of the Nama Bahero people in Shark Island. I stumbled upon that conversation. I got what topic exactly we're talking about, and he was like, "Yeah, oh yes, operation camps," and he was like, "Yeah, you know, the first where Namibia." I'm like, "Well, you first cross the dream camp, and then you explore the story, and again, I'd never want to be caught with the thing of you didn't do your due diligence. Someone in the audience after our show came and said, and like he's from the people who were part of the genocide, right? The families of the people who were part of the genocide, and he said to me, "Thank you for articulating the story of my people well."
Wow.
And it was like the reward of another thing, that countless giving this person,
Yeah.
and so that one person, watching Dave Chappelle, getting what he said. His mother taught him the word griot, and
Yeah.
griot was African person who was in charge, the story.
Yeah.
And what it is, when a griot dies, it's like a life. And I was like, the point, not the source, but the point where you come here, dramatic scholars, history is there. You see it in visual art, on stage, in music, in fashion. History is there, and it's articulated.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, in your experience, so far, I see that you also cross over from theater to film. I watched Cell 10, which I'm not sure if it was your first film or second film.
So 10 was, this is after I graduated. So after I graduated, I believe it's 2022. That's when we worked on it.
Yes. Could you say a little bit about Cell 10 and sort of, where it sort of got to reach within Botswana and beyond Botswana's borders, and what that meant for you as an actor?
And it's the value of word of mouth in itself. And again, the value also even beyond assisting. So 10 is a butterscotch production. It's Eddie and Veronica. And amazing people. I'm working with them now. I've been working with them for 3 years. And people to work with. And so with it, a friend of mine, they hit me up on that, there's this role I sent you forward, because I had been talking to them about like acting, or in the acting industry, and doing work together. And so even Cell 10 was the first time, I think, first film moment for me that I was a part of, that really pushed me in terms of, like, I learned about research. In school, you play but sometimes quite conservative in terms of the stories and the around children. But then having characters sexually abused by uncles, and that thing still haunts him, and his uncle is still doing this with the children. He feels like he needs to be the protector for those kids, and ask to protect himself, the event. And so he kills his father, so he kills aunties, and we happen to play in, not and I was talking to him and yeah, Cell 10, just like the president. And actually, the president Cell 10, this particular story, and it was just how things collide. It was just a crazy thing, And even with Cell 10, the research, what I'm doing research, you're going to those places where you don't want to go because maybe that hasn't happened to you. Maybe it has happened to you. How do you divorce that experience from yourself? And how do you not let that thing fall into who you are? Because I think acting is spiritual, acting is psychological. And if you don't have the right space, you can and release your family, projected into your own reality, which sometimes it just doesn't become a good working space. And so then, submitted to numerous film festivals, selected the best films, and it's one that I would love to see it manifest into a series, but taking a different approach to short film as short films programs.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have about 5 minutes to go. I don't see Dumisani yet. I don't think he's back. But I guess just in as we wrap up, what what's who are some of the people, I guess, from this time who are innovating in the theater space in Botswana to look out for, or even in the film space, whether it be arts festivals or any sort of innovation that someone who wants to get into the industry or maybe is finishing Form 5 can sort of try to reach out to.
I see. I'm happy to teach incubate. One of the things we recently started, Andre Moko, it's something called Battle of the Improv. And improv culture usually exists in the space of comedy, because there's a lot of comments, give and take with the audience. Us, one of the things we're trying to do is how we best, cultivate one acting skills, but two, also a space where people every Saturday, once or two Saturdays in the month can be like, I want some theater. That is the place to go. And so with us, with Battle of the Improv, it happens every 2 to 3 weeks. We just had, we're having our next one on the 20th of July. I'm gonna go to be Theater, and this one, like, it's acting, but we're infusing dance into it. We're infusing movement, and so we're trying to bring a theater culture where every weekend something is happening. But Emily Theater, that's the one that is doing the Battle of Improv in collaboration with Dramatic Scholars. What if the Dramatic Scholars, the play of a whole, we're also trying to introduce the aspect of staged readings, because I think a lot of times, and I was talking to my lecturer, and he said a lot of shows now he defends stuff. And then we haven't filtered out so much that haven't squeezed out the access, And so with us, that's what we're trying to prevent. And so there's also Bantu Film Festival, also done by Lesedi and Veronica Pilani. You should definitely check it out. It's happening in October. And again, the films, it's growing. I've seen it, I was a part of it 3 years ago as an MC, and just and it only had like I think it was 10 films from Botswana. And now last year we had about more than 20. Now it's growing into more than 25, right? And so there's this thing of like, this thing is evolving, it's evolving. So do be there, because it's great networking sessions. The National Arts Festival is also happening. I'm still waiting to hear Mighty Song Festival if it's still gonna be happening. I know they did a call out, but I've been for August. We're coming to August, so I'm just still a bit concerned there. But yeah, so there are things happening. Moratio Malema has a theater company called New Moon. They do. I was attending one of their productions. It was fire. Again, her body of work, because she's done work in Germany, South Africa. It's an infusion of all these different genres coming together.
Yeah.
And Mopato Theater was what Andrew Kola is doing.